All right, so Lesson 5, Module 2, Grade 6, Mr. Enyart here, is about creating division stories and using different models. So we're going to talk about tape diagrams, number lines, how they help us understand what's happening when we divide fractions, but also how to come up with a good division story, which will help us in turn be able to understand what operations to use when we have different mathematical situations arise. Now, in writing a story, there's kind of 5 main steps, and the first one is to decide on an interpretation. So what do the numbers mean? Am I taking 8/9 and putting them into groups of 2/9, or am I taking 8/9 and breaking it up into groups? And with it being 2/9, it's kind of hard to do that second one. So I'm going to do number 1. I'm going to interpret it as what is known as measurement division, which is when you break it up into groups of the number you're dividing, which in this case is 2/9, and then figuring out how many groups there are. So here are the definitions of measurement division and partitive division, and for the sake of this problem, I'm going to choose my interpretation of measurement division. So I've done step 1, which is to interpret the numbers and choose measurement or partitive. And again, those definitions are here. And then the step 2 is to make a model. And I can choose tape diagrams, number lines, area models, all things that you've worked on between lessons 1 and 4. So for this problem, it says tape diagram. I'm going to choose a tape diagram. And to make a tape diagram, I started by just making a big long rectangle and then dividing it into 9 equal pieces because I'm dealing with 9ths. Next, I shaded in 8 of the 9ths and marked it as 8/9, and I marked it on the bottom. You can mark it on the top. But what I'm going to do on the other side is I'm going to mark my sections of 2/9. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of 2/9 within my 8/9 total. So over here I've added step 3, which is to find the answer, and I just did. There are 4 2/9 within 8/9. And so I've added that over here as my answer, and I just want to prove it mathematically before I move on, and before I move to step 4, choose a unit. So if you remember in lessons 1 through 4, we learned that we can take what we're dividing, in this case 2/9, and rewrite it as a multiplication problem by its reciprocal. So remember, the reciprocal is the number, you basically just switch the numerator and denominator, but if you multiplied 2/9 and 9/2, you would get 1, and that's what a reciprocal is. So we leave 8/9 alone because we can't change what we're starting with. We multiply 9/2, we get 72/18, because when we multiply fractions, we multiply both the numerator and the denominator straight across. So 8 times 9 is 72, 9 times 2 is 18. But I recognize, 1, it's an improper fraction, 2, they can be reduced because they are both even. And most likely you may have started with dividing by 2, but I recognize both of these are multiples of 9. So I take 9 out of them, I divide 9 by both, as we talked about making equivalent fractions in lesson 4, and I get 8/2, but I can still reduce this and it's still an improper fraction. So I can divide both of those by 2, and I get 4/1, which of course anything over 1 is just a whole number of what the numerator is. In this case, it is 4. So I have proven that the answer is in fact 4. Which leads you to your final step, step 5, to set up a situation. So what could this be? I'm a fan of candy bars. I'm a fan of anything that can be broken up into pieces, pies, lasagna, food. I just like food. So let's say this is a candy bar that is made up of 9 pieces, and I already ate 1 of them, so I still have 8/9, and that's where I'm going to get my 8/9. I have 8/9 of a candy bar, and I want to break them into 2/9 size pieces, and I want to know how many sets of 2/9 I will have. Or let's say I want to share it with some friends, and each friend is going to get 2/9. How many friends can I share with? So maybe I can write a story like this. I have 8/9 of a candy bar and want to share it with my friends. If I give them each 2/9, how many friends can I share with? So I would set up 8/9 candy bar broken into sets of 2/9. And after I make my model and do my math, I would find out I could share with 4 friends. And now I've written my unit. 8/9, of course, would have been candy bars. 2/9 would also be candy bar pieces. So my final unit is friends, and I have gone through steps 1 through 5. I've written a great story, I've drawn a great model, and I've even done some extra math to prove it. So this is how we create division stories. So, for the sake of fun, let's see what a number line would do for us. Molly's friend Xavier also has 11/8 cups of strawberries. He needs 3/4 cup of strawberries to make a batch of tarts. How many batches can he make? Draw a model to support your solution. So we're going to start by making a number line out of 11/8. So take a moment to understand this. I made a number line from 0 to 2, 2 holes, and I broke it up into eighths, because I know 11/8 is going to be less than 16/8, which is 2. So now I'm just going to count over to 11. This is 8, so 9, 10, 11. And so I mark 11/8 right here, which I notice is the same as 1 and 3/8, but I'm actually going to probably stick with my improper fraction while I'm doing the math. And remember, 11/8 represents the cups of strawberries, and then I need 3/4 cups of strawberries to make a batch. So now I'm going to break it into groups of 3/4. But remember, I cut it into eighths, not fourths. So how do I find fourths when I'm dealing with eighths? Well, I could always just find an equivalent fraction of 3/4 to eighths, which would look like this. 3/4 is equal to 6/8 because 3 times 2 is 6, and 4 times 2 is 8. And to make equivalent fractions, we multiply or divide both numbers, numerator and denominator, by the same number. So times 2 gets me 6/8. Or I could also just try to visualize the fourths. I mean, when I first broke my number line up, I did my whole numbers, then I split it in half, and then I split each half in half, which of course made fourths. And so I can notice that every 2 spaces is a fourth, and every 1 space is an eighth. And so now I can mark my 3/4 or 6/8, and then I want to see how many of these I can put into my 11/8. So now I've marked my 3/4, and I realize that I make 1 full batch, but then I have another batch that is not going to be able to be made because it goes past the 11/8 here. So each batch is made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. If you look at the 3/4, it takes up 6 of these pieces, and I will be able to make 5 of those 6 pieces. So my claim is that I'm going to make 1 full batch and then 5/6 of another. So here's my claim mathematically. Now I want to prove it mathematically. So again, what I'm going to do is take what I'm dividing, groups of 3/4, and I'm going to make it into 4/3. Now remember, with multiplication, I don't have to have like denominators. So I didn't have to change it to 6/8. I know that's just going to make my numbers bigger and then have to do more mental math, and it might just be more difficult. So 11 times 4 is 44, and 8 times 3 is 24. But I notice it's improper and it can be simplified. And sure enough, when I divide both by 4, which is the greatest common factor I have of these two numbers, I get 11/6, because 11 divided by 4 is, 44 divided by 4 is 11, and 24 divided by 4 is 6. But again, with it being an improper fraction, that means I can pull 6/6 out, which gives me a 1 whole, and 11 minus 6 is 5, leaving me 5/6 left over. So my final answer would be 1 and 5/6 batches. I need to make sure I put my label down so that I explain what my numbers represent of the strawberry mixture. So take a couple moments to soak this all in, but remember, in review, we were creating division stories, and there are 5 steps. And so once we have numbers or an idea, then we want to interpret them, and today we were focusing on the measurement. And here are those definitions, interpretation. Then we make the model. Here's a tape diagram. Here's a number line. Then we find the answer. So we use the model to find the answer, and then we check it with our math rule of multiplying the reciprocal. And then, of course, we choose our unit. Over here, I was dealing with candy bars and friends. Over here, I'm dealing with strawberries and batches, cups of strawberries and batches. And then I set up the situation. So this one had Molly and Xavier, and up here, I had myself, candy bar, and friends. So now you have a good idea of how to make division stories. Try it on the rest of your practice, and feel free to review this lesson as much as needed.